Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of FitzRupee Cast. Red-Rupee here calling the shots for you as always, and we are, of course, playing DoW2, the Elite mod. It's been way too long, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time sticking around here before the game. I know a lot of people are wondering why I was absent for so long. Maybe I'll do like a Meet the Caster video or something later on, but for now, let's just get into this game. It's been far too long, as I have mentioned, so pardon me if I'm a bit rusty. Anyways, let's take a look. We've got the tricky Warlock over here by Mr. Noisy on the blue side with all his crazy offensive spells and weapons, and then we have the sneaky Lovecraftian Cthulhian Lictor Alpha played by Torpid on the red side. A Tyrannid versus Eldar matchup here on Green Tooth Gorge. Everything looking pretty standard as we get started into this game. We've got Banshees on the field for Noisy. We've got double Termagants coming out here for Torpid. And it looks like we're not seeing any super aggressive cap orders. Normally, you might see the Warlock running out here, playing aggressive, looking for some trouble to get into or some Destructors to fire off. But instead, we've got the Dire Avengers and Warlock going for that quick map control in the Eldar way. True to fashion, gonna get himself some victory points nice and quick and start ticking off those VPs. Here we have our first little skirmish. Dire Avengers aren't going to have any of it, going to find themselves some green cover, hunker down for the duration, and try to ping away at some of those Termagants. Meanwhile, Banshees grabbing some requisition all over the place. Torpid grabbed his ancillary points in the back there and now just lobbing up, bringing the Tyrannid swarm force to bear on these poor Dire Avengers. You can see, oh, actually, Noisy going for his first little power expenditure here. He dropped a quick 2 generators and went for the battle equipment on his Dire Avengers. Normally, you don't see that upgrade come quite as quickly, but I understand it. It's such a great upgrade. Your first starting squads for Eldars tend to be a bit lackluster until you get a couple quick upgrades on them, so getting that for the Dire Avengers are going to give them a lot more utility. Warlock coming back around after capturing the kind of opposed requisition point on the far side of the map. There's 3 for each player on this map, which is actually the most on any of the 1v1 maps, so controlling all of those actually makes a pretty big difference in the long run. We've got an engagement here. Noisy playing kind of low on squads here to start out. Oh man, also buying himself the Immolator, getting a lot of power upgrades before getting any more on the field, which is a curious choice. It's going to cut down on his map presence, and unless he can really do something with these squads he's spending this power on, which so far he unfortunately hasn't, I doubt that's really going to pay off for him. Banshees are getting the cap here on the natural VP and also getting their aspect of strength. So let's see, that's 20, 25, and another 10 or 15 so far on just squad upgrades. Banshees do not want to be out here. They're very out of position, quite literally surrounded by Tyrannid. They're going to get out of there with actually no losses, surprisingly enough. Meanwhile, Dire Avengers hanging out over here. Nice Destructor followed by the Immolator. That was some big damage on those Termagants before the engagement even really gets rolling. Noisy's not doing too much with all he's spent right now, though. You can see the map's quickly turning red. Torpid's not even worried about using the majority of his army right now. He's got the Lictor and Hormagaunts just running around capping requisition. And sooner or later, everything's going to start looking red here unless Noisy can get onto the field. We now have Rangers, which are going to be great for dealing with the Lictor Alpha. You kind of need something that's going to detect. And unless, you know, for Eldar, that's really your only option. You got to go Rangers or nothing. Unfortunately for Eldar, they can't just upgrade a squad to detect. They don't get a sergeant or something along those lines. None of their Warlocks or Exarchs can detect, so Rangers it's going to be. Lictor sneaking around. Oh, it looked like he was just going to engage right there, but I think he might just be hanging out trying to get this last requisition point. You can see that's actually going to be the last one in possession of poor Noisy here, having a pretty rough start. He's going to need something out of all this power, as I mentioned earlier. A good engagement to get himself into the game here. I feel like he's kind of struggling to even get out on the map. He went with all these generators nice and quick and a bunch of upgrades without many squads. A Destructor going down, a grenade following it up, a little damage all over the place, but really not able to scare any of these squads off for the time being. Warlocks being the usual disruptive self, breaking the line, dropping fire and Destructors all over the place. A beautiful Immolate there, not only hitting those 2 Termagants, but in the retreat path of those Hormagaunts as well. And man, that Warlock right there, I think that worked out. I think that's what Noisy needed right there. He just pushed both, all 3 of the Gaunt and Gant squads off of the field Rangers now getting some shots off on those warrior broods and suppressing them back into the base. Not in the game suppression sense, of course, but, you know, just in the general usage of the word. But man, look at the map right now. He's holding VPs, which is great, of course, being Eldar. Noisy has tons of requisition, thank goodness, because if you look at the disparity right now between the two armies, we've got 248 to 379. Right now, Torpid is gaining more than 100 requisition per minute more than Noisy. So even if Noisy takes out a generator or two, even if he leaves these Termagants, a couple minutes later, that advantage is just going to dissipate as that requisition keeps pouring in at a crazy amount for Torpid right now. Rangers getting some more shots in on those warrior brutes. That's really what you want those Rangers to be shooting at. You don't want to be wasting shots on these Gaunts and Gants if you can help it. You really want to be trying to set up a Synapse bomb later in an engagement and picking off some of these warriors or even forcing them off the field. Guardians going inside of that tower. Warriors retreat, expecting the next Ranger shot. Let's take a look and see where they're at. Torpid's heading into Tier 2. Noisy not going to be far behind, but even so, there's still not a lot on the map. He's going to have to really play this tight to keep this going. He's managed to keep the victory point advantage, though. He's got about a 100-point advantage right now. Lictor's still kind of roaming around on his own. In case you didn't notice, the Lictor did get those feeder tendrils, so that's going to make him a force to be reckoned with in one-on-one combat. Even Banshees have a hard time taking him down once he gets that, so long as he can get a couple special attacks off here and there. And right now, both sides not bringing any new squads onto the field, and Noisy's kind of just trying to mitigate some of this requisition advantage right now. I mean, all of the rear points were fully matured for Torpid over here, but he's picking and choosing his engagements pretty well so far. He had that initial kind of problem getting out of his base in those first couple engagements, but the Warlock did some serious work up by the power farm. Didn't manage to get any gens, but bought enough time to at least get a little bit of map control. But I don't know, this still isn't looking too good. Just looking at the current state of the map, and oh, here comes the Lictor. Ooh, getting an upgrade. Ooh, getting the Lone Hunter. That's such an interesting upgrade. What that does, if you're unfamiliar with it, is, unless of course it's changed in the Elite mod, I'm not terribly familiar with it at the moment, but it makes him deal 50% more damage and take 25% less damage. Oh, but the Banshee's getting a good special attack and then suppressing him, getting a second one, and actually going to be able to take him down despite both those upgrades. That's extremely surprising and very fortunate for Noisy right there, man. That melee skill on the Banshees, yeah, as Noisy just calls out, definitely took place in that engagement. Otherwise, those Banshees would not have survived. Nice use of the Warp Gate, actually, just using that Warp Gate, of course, if you're not remembering, the Warlock Warp Gate gives a little bit of health regen. If the Banshees hadn't lost that model, they'd probably be back up to full strength at the moment. But playing very reserved with the Banshees, not rushing them in. Warp Spider's now on the field, and we got a Venom Brute coming out for Torpid. Torpid probably expecting the Wraith Lord, but now that's going to work out for Noisy. He didn't get the Wraith Lord, he has the Warp Spiders, which are going to be very effective against all this light infantry, and do pretty reasonable damage against the Warrior Brute as well. And of course they're very mobile. I'm not sure that's the engagement that the Banshees want to be in. This is a really tricky kind of army for the Banshees to engage when you're fighting Tyrannid, because you know they're going to be saving those Venom stacks just for those Banshees and keeping them from getting to run around, cause trouble, suppress everything, and do all the kind of nasty things that Banshees are known to do. But this game could really go in any direction at this point. I think Torpid kind of has the advantage, but it's going to really depend. It's always a divergent game in Tier 2. It can really go in any direction. That it just depends on how our players deal with these coming engagements. Lictor kind of sneaking around on his own. He got the Lone Hunter upgrade, so that's pretty much what I expect him to be doing for the game. Oh, we've got Warp Throw on the field as well, pulling everything into those Banshees. They scream, suppress one of the squads, force off the Warriors. Some late gate Raveners on the field, actually. That's kind of a curious choice. I'm not sure what exactly he was going for there. I don't know if he just wants to kind of have something that's also mobile to help deal with the Warp Spiders. Once they get their Devour upgrade, if they're hanging out with these Venom Brutes, they'll be doing some very heavy infantry damage. Once again, we have Warp Spiders hanging around by this webway gate. They're kind of sitting cover right now and just eat up a bunch of these Termagants, ripping them apart with those Death Spinners. And wow, look at the regen on that. They're just sitting in green cover and don't even care. The webway does go down. And they're not taking much damage at all. But tearing through the Termagants, that's actually kind of a poor engagement for Torpid to be sitting around in for the time being. He should have tried to get something in there. Ravener's now coming around. I'm not sure if their burrow was on cooldown or whether he just didn't want to waste it, knowing that they could just warp out from under it. Lictor gets himself caught out of position right here. The Banshees and the Warlock in tow, scaring him off pretty easily. Webway Gate's not something I often see used with Warlock. Normally the Warlock is using all his red, hitting that swift movement, hitting those distort fields, but I like seeing something different coming in here from Noisy. Pretty great to see some good Warlock play that doesn't revolve around swift movement and distort field. Doesn't have a lot of red for the time being. Torpid has a pretty big army though still. Noisy, I mean 2 Warp Spider squads, gonna be able to get all over the map and cause lots of trouble for these Tyranids. We now have the Adrenal Gland Warrior Brood on the field as well, so we'll have both the ranged and the melee synapse once both those Warrior Broods are roaming around. Another Warp Throw. I don't think that was meant to hit anything though. I think he was expecting the Warriors to continue chasing the Banshees. The Warp Throw actually would have pulled those off of the Banshees if they had chosen to pursue. We got the Venom Broods capping in the middle. Will they get the cap? I think they will, but they do lose themselves a model for the cost of that. Meanwhile, we got Warp Spiders falling back here. The full brunt of the Tyranid force kind of moving in, ready to maybe bash some power, something along those lines as Torpid heads into Tier 3. Another Webway Gate going up right over here by the power. But those Warp Spiders are taking tons of damage. Everything starts popping out though, and it's going to be a big engagement for these Banshees. The Warriors overextended. They got such huge HP pools though right now. 1485 at level 1. That's even bulkier than Assault Space Marines. None of those are going to be going down anytime soon. Meanwhile, Banshee's getting tracked out here with all of these Termagants. Great use of the Immolator throughout the game. Nice flesh hook going down there and taking out the Warlock. Meanwhile, these Banshees taking some pretty heavy losses. Lictor not getting his Lone Hunter bonus and taking lots of damage. Down he goes to the Warp Spiders. 2 squads of Warp Spiders putting out heavy, heavy damage. That Lictor being a pain all over the place. But now he's down for the count. Might be able to purchase him back later, but Torpid's sitting on a reasonable pile of power right now, so he might not be wanting to buy that hero back and choose to get himself a nice Tier 3 unit instead as we head into that portion of the game. 235 to 366. Noisy has lost his victory point advantage at this point in the game. Torpid has a lot of stuff to deal with for only Noisy's 4 squads. You can see Torpid has the full 6 and gonna be getting himself something else. I'd imagine we'd be seeing a Carnifex here shortly coming into the latter part of the game. Another Warp Throw going down, pulling the Warriors, both squads, right into these Warp Spiders. Warp Spiders had to pull back a little bit because it was a melee squad coming in here, but still manages to scare off the Raveners and do some pretty heavy damage to the Warrior Brood as well. Webway Gate going up and regenning once again. You can see he's just using this kind of as a combat heal for these Warp Spiders. Really interesting to see the Webway Gates being used. Another one going up. Wow, that's the 4th or 5th Warp Gate we've been seeing going up. He's kind of been putting them a little too forward. I figure if he's expecting to use them as kind of a recharge, maybe he'd want to put them back here a little bit and buy all this green cover, and then he could use this. The R would still hit the Warp Spiders hanging out.
No place is barred to us.
But here comes the Carnifex.
Half the pleasure is in plan.
Another Immolate and Destructor probably going down on these poor Termagants. Taken, oh, there it is, beautiful shot. And Warp Spiders just slicing and dicing. Guardians in a lot of trouble heading into that garrison, but you see Torpid knew it was coming, drops the Spore Mines. They're not going to be able to hang out there. They're going to have to hit the retreat. The moment they get the opportunity, he recognizes that, gets them out of there without any real losses. Might lose a model or two here to a Hormigaunt, but nothing terribly dangerous happening for the time being. Warp Spider's proving to be a huge thorn in the side of Torpid right now. This is actually a pretty vanilla game. We haven't seen any of the new squads or units or abilities really happening from the Elite mod. Everybody playing pretty standard. These Warp Spiders, man, I see them used so rarely these days, but they are so nasty. Especially in one-on-one where map control plays into it so very much. So Noisy isn't going to really have anything to do with this Carnifex for the time being. He has, of course, Haywire Grenades, but that's only going to stall it out for a little bit. He has no real solid, steady anti-vehicle damage, which you really need for those big walkers. Actually have the Barbed Strangler and Spore Cyst coming down for that Carnifex. Banshee's getting in there, getting a good kill on the Warriors. Warp Spiders dashing all over the place, getting a little recharge over here. Look at how fast their health goes up from that webway gate ability. Dire Avengers dashing around, trying to keep themselves out of trouble, and the Carnifex is just looking for something to drop some Barbed Stranglers on. Map changing hands once again. Noisy took a while, but he finally managed to get some solid map control, got all his requisition points at least going back again. And constantly just pecking away at these smaller Gant squads with his Warlock, either dropping the Immolate, dropping the Destructor, trying to use that Warp Throw to pull him in and out of engagement. Torpid needs to get his Lictor Alpha back up here again. Since he took out those Rangers, he can kind of run around and do whatever he wants without that Lictor Alpha over here. Oh man, I think the Barbed Strangler was actually hitting that Dire Avenger way over on the far side though. Another webway goes down. Kind of a problem with Tyrannid is you know they're going to have a lot of detectors moving all over the field pretty constantly, so it's tricky to find a good spot for those webways that they aren't going to be focus fired down pretty easily. Noisy in Tier 3 probably going to be purchasing something here shortly. I'm not sure if he's saving up for an Avatar or a Fire Prism. A Fire Prism I think would be excellent right now to deal with this Carnifex and this big nitty blob. Switching between that Focus Beam and Wide Beam. Able to deal with any of the threats on the field right now. And that is indeed what he's going for. And that's just about going to put him at PopCap, sitting at 87 with that Fire Prism out and one Warp Spider down. Had some Spore Mines called onto the field, still hanging out, causing some trouble. And all is quiet while both players consider their strategical options and regroup. Noisy moving back out onto the field. Torpid establishing his central map position once again, probing around, trying to figure out where he can go. Can't deal with those Dire Avengers. Those Dire Avengers do some pretty reasonable damage once they get both their battle equipment and Exarch upgrades. And it looks like Torpid's going to go looking for trouble. Banshee's kind of way out here. That's not where they want to be. They're just going to get Venom sacked and slowed right down. He has to retreat those before too much else happens, but the Fire Prism's on the field. Carnifex is double haywired, so the 50% snare actually does stack and completely roots the Carnifex for the time being. Carnifex gonna try to get a couple shots off, but that Prism is not staying around for it. Range on that Fire Prism is extreme, and that Barbed Strangler Carnifex isn't really going to be able to do much about it. Webway's coming into play here. Noisy can just pop his army out wherever he needs it for the time being. He's got one next to each side of the map for those VPs, and of course using them as recharging stations. The one out's on the field like that.
I walk in the witch path, and it leads to war.
Warlock dashing all over the place, but he needs to do something. Noisy's getting very low on victory points for the time being. This Fire Prism will really do a lot in helping him hold the middle and maybe allow him to initiate some battles a little more. He's still on that Focus Beam. I know he wants to keep that for the Carnifex, but when he's firing at the army, I feel like he really wants to be switching over to that Wide Beam. Of course, the Carnifex kind of has to be the priority target for the time being. That big Barbed Strangler doing tons of damage. Warp Throw going down once again. Only manages to get a few Gaunts and Gants, but that's going to make them easy pickings to rip apart for the fire prism and those warp spiders. Torpid's been searching around for those web weights, wants to make sure those don't stay up. Definitely a little bit easier for the mid since they do have those warrior detectors all over the place. Banshees, you can see, as I mentioned before, unless you can really get a favorable approach and a solid initiation with them, they kind of just get targeted down by those Termagant Venom stacks. Raveners move in, but they're not really able to do too much after their initial burrow strike. Those warp spiders can just warp right out from under them. Looks like the Lictor Alpha. Oh no, that's not the Lictor Alpha. That's an actual Lictor itself hanging out in the center here. Camouflage, tapping the points. With Noisy down to just 100 points, he really needs to be careful as to whether he lets those Tyranid take that center point, because if they do, it's going to be a hard spot to break. Lictor's going to be moving in. He's got to be very careful with that Fire Prism, as the Lictor does do heavy melee. Could sneak around on a hunt-kill mission right here and make short work of it if he's not careful. Here it goes, Lictor's moving in for the kill. One hit you can see doing about 100 damage each shot to that Fire Prism. Actually misses the hit on the Lictor. Lictor moves back in once again. Carnifex and Termagant's moving in, trying to distract the Eldar army. He needs to keep pulling that Fire Prism back. He is continuing to do so. Finally gets the knockback hit on that Lictor and saves the Fire Prism. Another hit or two and that would have been all she wrote for that thing, and that probably would have been the game for Noisy. That said, he's sitting on a huge pile of requisition. Actually can't buy anything else at this point. The Warp Spider squads and the Eldar infantry squads actually become pretty high on population once they get their Exarchs. Carnifex sitting at pretty low health for the time being. 237 to 106 right now. Banshee screaming in from behind, managed to get the far victory point and catching the Warriors off guard. Meanwhile, these Warrior Broods on the far side taking tons of damage. Is he going to pull those back? It might go down. Oh no, that's a big loss there for Torpid. Those Adrenal Gland Warrior Broods, definitely a very powerful unit that you don't want to be losing at this point in the game. These Warp Spiders almost level 3. The first squad is level 3, almost level 4. And they're just pouring out huge anti-infantry damage at this point in the game. Warlock actually getting Providence now. That's going to be no fun for Torpid. He'll be warp throwing and immolating all over the place.
Where is there need of me?
When you can't buy any squads, what else do? You buy some really shiny armor. Tyranids coming out. 2-0 cap at the moment in favor of Noisy. He really needs it because it's getting down to the wire. He's sacrificing lots of Banshees to get that cap, but I think he knows he really needs to make sure he doesn't bleed any more points, because this game could go for the long haul. Fire Prism doing its best to hold on right now. Not really a good option to deal with this Fire Prism. The Venom Brood taking tons of damage. Lictor now out here trying to flesh hook some Warp Spires. He needs to get his normal Lictor Alpha out here too and really get two highly destructive units. Lictor taking, oh my gosh, look at that damage coming from those Warp Spires. Doing crazy, crazy damage just in a quick burst. That Lictor's hunting for the Fire Prism, but really can't do too much about it.
We will stand against any enemy.
Man, oh man, Noisy's back in this game with a vengeance. A rather precarious position, considering his early map control. Let's take a look. Actually, it's very much switched. Noisy's now making about 100 more requisition than Torpid at this moment. Mid upkeep pretty high right there, and only a couple requisition points in his grasp for the time being. Big shot coming in. Oh, almost teleported out from under that Barb Strangler. Banshees have to pull out of there. The Warp Spiders did get suppressed. Ooh, and another bullseye from that Barb Strangler Carnifex. Warp Spider's very low on health, but you know what? He's just going to be able to pull him back to this web weight most likely. Heal him on up. That's what they do. They teleport over there, heal up, get some energy back, and get ready for the next engagement without having to retreat all the way to the base. Lictor Alpha is up. He's over here trying to capture, but he's taken tons of damage, manages to get out from under that grenade, but doesn't get the decap. 169 to 96 right now. And we've got a Wraith Lord coming onto the field. That's going to be a nasty surprise for Torpid. I think that'll really help secure this Fire Prism's position. Lictor won't be able to get in here as easily. But look, he's going for those rear armor hits. He's trying so hard to get behind it while the rest of the Eldar army's distracted. Lictor might actually get this Fire Prism. It's just sitting there. If this Fire Prism goes down, that could be terrible for Noisy. The Lictor does take it out, but lots of damage going down for the rest of the Tyrannid army. This Carnifex can kind of run around and do whatever it feels like now that there's nothing out here to contest it. The Wraith Lord and the Carnifex can battle, but I don't know if the Lictor... Oh, the Lictor's actually over here and not capturing anything. 166 right now. Torpid's really been struggling to get control of the VPs at this point. Another Fire Prism coming right onto the field. Noisy, who was sitting on so much resource at this point, really managing to keep control of his bleed, kind of normally pretty difficult for Eldar later in the game. Providence getting activated, the Wraith Lord coming in behind these Termagants, and between these two units, these Gaunts and Gants are going to do next to nothing. Nice dominating position coming in here. Big slap there on a single Hormagaunt from the Wraith Lord. That was kind of funny. Seems like a bit of overkill, if I say so myself. It looks like the Hormagaunt squad actually surviving just barely. Gonna have to be careful with that. Wraith Lord right there. Flesh Hook going down. Banshee's screaming in from behind. They don't get the Venom Sacks down on them in time. Looks like they had already used at least one of those on the Warlock. There it goes. Banshee's now way back there, unable to do too much for the time being. Raveners get forced off, and it's just craziness all over the place. Haywire going down on the Carnifex, and that might be it for it with the Fire Prism out here as well. Pouring shots into the back line. Down goes the Carnifex. Huge win for Torpid right there. Or sorry, Noisy right there, not Torpid. Oh, and the GG dropped from Mr. Noisy. Torpid drops the GG as well. And that's going to be the game. Wow! I didn't think that Noisy had that there for a while. Especially after losing that Fire Prism, I thought it was kind of dire straits for him, but he brought it back. Banshees took control of that engagement, neutralized that Venom Brood, and then allowed them to take out this nasty Carnifex. Ooh, he's kind of floating away, some biomass over there. Probably don't want to breathe that in, then you have little mids growing inside you. That's no fun for anyone. I think this really sums it up right here. There's a Carnifex, some Warriors, some Gaunts, and then Banshees kind of standing triumphantly. So anyways, that's going to be the game. I hope you guys had a good time. I know I did. There's going to be plenty more crazy Dawn of War 2 action to come. I'll give you guys the spiel as I always did since it's been so long. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Steam, all the fun usual stuff. I do the social networking a little bit, but I'm not super aggressive about it. But anyways, that's our game. I'm going to get out of here. This was Red-Rupee. I'll catch you guys next time.